So it's actually not talking about that much at all, but it is, and it is carrying his values. And again, this is still the Sermon on the Mount. Boy, it's tough when, when you think, and I was just thinking, you sat down with Jesus, and I think this morning when he was praying and talking, I think he talked about us colliding with Jesus. Well, these guys sat down with Jesus to hear this little lesson, and oh my goodness, I mean, Jesus just absolutely scorched them while he sat there and smiled at them and shook his head and gave them peace. Really, and that's still what I think made them hate Jesus, because he could absolutely scorch you and make you feel better about yourself at the same time. And how in the world can anyone do that? But I don't know about y'all, when you read these things, and I can almost feel Jesus talking, and he was calm and peaceful, and he wasn't threatening, and then he's saying, but if you want to go to heaven, if you want to be part of the kingdom of heaven, you've got to be more righteous than the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Well, if you were a person, then what was the possibility of that? None, was it? So here he is talking nice and peacefully, gonna make me feel good, and then he basically says, "Oh, but you can't be part of the kingdom of heaven," and then smiles at me, and I'm thinking, who is this? And that's exactly it, isn't it? And I think that's the thing when we talk about this and what Jesus teaches and what's so different is, and it's carrying his values, but we're not just responsible for what we do, are we? Dad, well, I remember back, you may not know you taught me this, but you did. So when I first worked with Dad in his office, we know too much about each other. He had an ashtray in every room and kept a cigarette burning in every room. And when he went to another room, there was a cigarette left burning in the room he left. And if you sat in there, he still told people to quit smoking. And he told someone one day, don't do as I say, or don't do as I do as I say. And that's something us doctors, well, I think as Christians, we kind of have a habit of that too, don't we?
Just as parents.
And as parents, don't we? Yes. But that's what we're saying here. So God doesn't just care. Jesus doesn't just care about what we do, does he? Jesus cares about what we show people, what we show everyone involved. And that's the kicker. And that we're going to talk about three of them here. But that's the kicker. It's easy for me. No, it's not easy. It's much easier for me to act right than to actually think right, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I can usually clean up. That's what I say is still as a Sunday school teacher, as a doctor, I think as a parent, I've got almost that same thing as I want to show everyone the right thing, right? I mean, I want people to look at me as a doctor and say, look at him, he's nice and healthy. He must know what he's talking about. As a Sunday school teacher, oh, he does everything right, whatever. But if I've got it hidden and y'all find out, then my witness isn't so good anymore in any of those things, is it? So if you tell your kid, don't do something, yet you do it, you really lost your witness there, hadn't you? Anyone tried that? How's that work out for us as parents?
They always, when they're 37, they'll still throw it up.
They throw it back and say, well, that's what you taught me, isn't it? And it's true. And it's the same. I mean, we had, 1,600 kids in the church or whatever, however many they said. What do you think they're looking at if they're unchurched people?
Example.
They're looking for someone that's a example so they can say, yeah, well, that's what I thought about church all along, isn't it? And it's fine. And Jesus even says here, first you've got to do it. First you've got to not commit murder. That'll be the first one we talk about. But then what? Then you truly have to train your mind not to even start down that road at all.
It's hard. It's hard to be a Christian. That's why I tell everybody it is not it's not easy. It's not difficult to accept them. It's just the hardest thing ever to deny yourself.
And
That's what you're doing.
And that's it. We're going to get to that, but that's exactly what it is. It's denying yourself totally. I'm going to talk about, but I deserve. So I'm a good Christian. I deserve to prosper, right?
That's what we think.
So let me answer Jesus things. So I'm going to say Jesus. So Mary Beth, you deserve. Finish out Jesus'
I deserve
thought.
death and
Death and
hell.
eternal damnation, don't
Right.
you?
Yeah.
And that's the problem is from what we think. So I think I deserve whatever.
Right.
Jesus knows what I deserve
Absolutely.
is absolutely nothing, and so, but that's what we're going to talk about here, and it's still going to be the same thing, and it is carrying his values, and that's the difficult thing, and I think we all kind of know, but I'll say because it's hard to, first you have to act like it even if you don't feel it. The Old Testament works is what?
As a guide, I mean,
And what is works?
works is
Evidence.
Works is doing the right thing, isn't it?
right.
Do you act yourself into good thinking or think yourself into good acting?
Wow. Write that one down.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
And,
Randy.
and I think that is chicken and the egg. But
Yeah.
but when we talk about Old Testament and that, what was motivation in there at all? Do you see motivation in the Old Testament?
Well, they when I read it, because I don't really know how it was, but when I read it, I think they were fearful of death. I mean, they were so comfortable right now. They had it different to me. I mean, if they didn't work, they didn't eat. If they did something that was out of the law, they would be stoned if you were committing adultery. You know what I mean? That, to me,
They
there was more
followed the
of a
commandments for who? Who'd you follow the commandments for? Old Testament.
well for God, but I mean, it was
You really
the Ten
followed it for
Commandments.
yourself, didn't you?
Right, so you wouldn't be
So you followed it for yourself. Who do we follow
Jesus.
for? As we get better, we're following for Jesus. And
Right.
we're going to talk about all that anyway. So this is still the Sermon on the Mount. We've actually gone backwards from last time. So, and the first one is, and this is going to be 5:17 through 22, and then 43 and 45. And if you look at this, just reading the whole thing, all Jesus did, he took 6 behaviors and says the Old Testament says this, and just think of what's happening here. And what do you think the crowd said? The first one. Oh yeah, well that's tough. I like that though. That's good and firm. And then what did Jesus say? But I say that doesn't even start to scratch the surface of what you really need to be doing. The law says this, I say this. So the first is look to the scriptures, and that's very important. So 5 through 17. Don't assume I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For I assure you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all things are accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches people to do so will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. I bet they loved him right after that. I bet they were like, I don't even know. I guess the closest I can think to that, one time I was coaching baseball, and as a young kids and pretty good, and this kid was doing major league stuff. I don't know how many of y'all have coached and stuff yet, but he was one hand catching and Willie Mays basket catching, and basically I told him that is not how you do it. You do it this way. Well, major leaguers do it this way. And my answer was, well, yeah, but if you continue to do it that way, you will never be a major leaguer. And that's basically what Jesus is saying. Yeah, that's how people do it, but that's not it. So the first part, they thought that Jesus came, the people that didn't like him, what did they think he came to do?
Be king and to,
Destroying the law,
Right,
right.
basically refute everything the Old Testament.
So when he says, "I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill," how did he fulfill? How's he going to fulfill the law?
because he's going to be the sacrifice. Someone has to die.
Well, but he also showed he's the only one that didn't break a commandment. He fulfilled the law by not breaking a commandment.
Okay. So he was able to do, and then was good enough to say, but that's not good enough yet. So, the next part that I think very important to talk about now, again, is the right to life. We have all kinds of things where the Bible is being disintegrated, and I think one of the most common things that we hear all the time, yeah, but it says that in the Old Testament, but when Jesus came, he changed all that. Well, what's Jesus have to say? And this goes back to, so for I assure you, until heaven and earth pass away, not the smallest letter or one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all things are accomplished. What I said there doesn't leave much room for the old whiteout to your Bible, does it? And don't y'all hear that all the time? Don't y'all hear people say all the time, well, Jesus changed the Old Testament, he made it obsolete? Y'all ever heard that?
I've got a reference book in my office that they use in religious classes, and it's a big old thick thing, and it basically says that right there. It breaks the Bible down into all these categories. You know, it's real detailed, but it kind of does separate old and new in that when the new came along, supersede.
Right.
That's what they look at.
And I think that's, you know, we call this class digging deeper, and we go pretty deep. Why do we want to do? Why do we need to do that?
They need to feed on the news.
You're going to say something. Go
Well, I
ahead.
just had an example in my head pop up. We look at an ocean of water and we just see the top of it. It's so pretty, but there's a lot of stuff under it.
Right. And everything might kill you or be whatever. You've got to study it all, because Jesus says right here, not one thing is going to go away. When you read something and you think, well, that superseded some other thing, what does your brain need to think? When I doctor, I have a way I try to do things when people are unique or difficult, and I say I take the information like a test question. So I gather all the information up, and I just say, if it's a test question, what would be the answer? And often people will come in and they'll already have an answer for me, and not always, but a lot of times I can see where they got that answer. But what happened? Well, they had to either erase some facts, take some facts away, or they had to add some facts to go from here to that answer. So back to this, when we see something and say, oh, that supersedes the Old Testament, what did we do?
We were adding something.
Well, we erased some facts, didn't we? And so what do we need to do when you see that? You need to go back and read it and see, okay, now how can these two things mean the same thing? Because that's what Jesus is doing here. Jesus is telling us, I said that, but it means this. Well, how does Old and New Testament say the same thing? Because that's the bottom line. It never says different. And the big part of that we're going to talk about is this again. I think, y'all tell me if you think I'm wrong. Old Testament was concerned, if I'm reading it, primarily with who? Me. Jesus is primarily concerned with who? Whoever's watching me. Jesus is concerned with my witness to the next person. And Jesus knows if I'm good to, if I am as righteous as the next statement, if I'm as righteous as the Pharisees and Sadducees, what's my witness going to be? It's going to be good. Let's go to the next one. So, therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches people to do so. This is very not fun to study. It's, yeah.
Not for
Here we
teachers.
go on to something else.
Yeah. So, therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches people to do so will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Ouch. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So here's what I said, and then I want to talk about it. Notice that breaking / following are followed by teaching. We are held accountable to our actions, not just for the effect it has on ourselves, but on others. Remember when we say, but I deserve, what should follow is eternal punishment, death and hell. So we're held accountable, one, for not breaking the least of these commands, right? We're held accountable that same time we break one for what? Teaching others the same thing. And I think that's something, to me. Well, what if I break a command? What answer do I have? Right now, I sit here today. You break a command, we call that sin. What do?
Repent.
You repent, ask for forgiveness, right? What about my effect on someone else? Can I handle that?
Depends if you use it part of your testimony. I mean, as an example, like I messed up and I confessed, and you need to know about it, or so. You know that I don't know. That's
It can be
it's a rocky
positive in
road.
that sense that others are watching and they did see you confess and say, okay, he messed up. He confessed, God forgave him, he moves on. If you don't confess and they see that and they think, well, gosh,
Or
he got away
Christian.
with it. Or you sit here in class and say, well, I did this and God didn't really do anything, so I think it's okay. We'll just keep doing that. That's
So
what
you
he's
say-
talking about here, is that you're not going to fare very well.
Right. So in the kingdom of heaven, where is I can handle myself, but if I'm looking at from Jesus' standpoint, what's more important? What I teach
What others
in
get from that. Yeah.
It looks like that the least and the most are both going to be in the kingdom of heaven.
Oh, come on,
That's
man.
kind of confusing.
Yeah, well, you can mess up and still get there, is what it said. I mean, that's what he's saying. It doesn't say you can't get to heaven if you break a commandment or you teach somebody else, but you won't be considered as great as somebody else. We've talked before about the kind of the caste system in heaven. Where are we going to fit in there? Is one person more important than the other? And we all agreed we're not going to be the 24 elders. They seem to have a pretty good spot there, but we'll be somewhere in there. So, but we could be the least. We're
So,
still in there, but we're the low man on the totem
Well,
pole.
I heard something one time that kind of taught me that you commit the sin and then you get forgiveness, but then you have to quit doing the sin. You don't
Right.
keep
It's
on
not
doing
much of a witness if you just
And that's
keep doing
what
it and keep
witness is,
asking
is
for
stop doing what you're doing.
forgiveness. You stop what you're doing.
so 20 is to finish this. For I tell you, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. We've talked about this before. What is righteousness? And our definition when we study is righteousness is being usable by God. Is that right? It's to be able to be usable by God. And so when you look at the scribes and the Pharisees, and Jesus said, your righteousness has to surpass those. Well, how can it? And it can because they weren't very usable to God, were they? I mean, we call them hypocrites. What did they do? They acted
They were
one
righteous
way,
in their own eyes
but they
and in
didn't.
the people that looked at them, but they weren't righteous in God's eyes.
Right. So I thought today, did anyone see in the paper the diamond that the lady found? I think is in the paper this morning.
4-point-something carats.
Yeah, well, she found a 4.1 carat diamond, a giant diamond at the Crater of Diamonds.
Murfreesboro? Wow.
Uh-huh. So, what do you think if we're talking about righteous? Compare that. So, a neat diamond, wasn't it? How pretty do you think it was?
It's not really pretty when you get over
Okay, it wasn't very pretty, was it?
No.
Would you want, Haley? Would y'all want to have that on a ring? Huh?
You have to cut it down. And
Oh, I mean,
polish
it's a great diamond. It's very diamondy, but it's not usable, is it? And that's what a Pharisee is. He's very godly, but he wasn't usable. Wasn't usable. So what happened with that diamond? What did they do? What do you think they did?
They cut it, polished it.
They cut it and polished it, and now it's beautiful and worth $1 million.
Some man made a wooden box, but
And so again, that is righteousness. It's not just it's not just the material, but it's usefulness. And again, there's all kinds. So what I said is we must be of the right material. So what is that? What we're talking about today. If I'm going to say we must be of the right material, what do we have to do? Follow the law, right? And usable. And what's that?
Testimony or witness.
Go back. What's that?
Yeah, righteousness.
What do we have to do to be usable to God?
you have to be saved, redeemed.
It's almost it.
Your questions are way too vague. I mean,
This is very-
I know.
this is
I'm
very
trying to be
specific. You
elementary.
have
Sorry.
to submit to God,
Right, okay.
and that is not vague. And if we cannot submit to God, we cannot be usable to God.
Okay.
Would anyone argue that?
Right.
That's what Jesus is talking about here. Now, any of y'all's brains a little bit fat right now? Can you imagine these poor souls sitting here with Jesus right now? I mean, can you imagine the dinner time conversations after they sat and heard this kind of stuff? He said, what?
That's one of the things, when you read this passage and just all of, chapter 5 and 6, it seems like Christ basically, it says that, he's up on the mountaintop and he sits down with all the disciples, and it seems like he just drops one hammer after another on these guys. He basically says, and again, we're talking about the definition of righteousness and all this stuff. I think what they're seeing and probably hearing is like, well, these scribes and Pharisees are the most righteous people we know, and we're just living in the dirt, and there's no way that we can exceed these people, and then it's just, and not only that, but hey, murder is also in your heart, and one thing after another. And it seems like at a certain point, and I think this kind of reflects on just the intense, just intelligence of God, that it's almost like he's planting questions, because he's creating a need. He's basically saying, when it comes to the law, I'm going to fulfill it. But as far as you all are concerned, unless your righteousness exceeds the scribes and Pharisees, you have no hope. You have no hope. And that's probably how they felt. They're probably like, okay, and then that's going to start, hopefully the juices flowing. They're going to come back to, how do we get hope? And it's like, that's when he starts, answering those questions. But it's almost like, just like with discipleship, you have to plant that seed, then it has to be watered, then it has to come to fruition where an idea or a need starts to develop, where they start to recognize their need. And it's almost like that's what he's just, nurturing these people along.
And that's what he did. I mean,
Yeah.
he's breaking them down completely
Mm-hmm.
so that they recognize that need.
Mm-hmm.
And that need is to become selfless.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the tough thing about it all, is what is that ultimate need?
But again, though, he's giving the solution. And people would say, well, that seems kind of misleading because what's the answer? Why didn't he give it? He gives it right away. He says, hey, I'm here to fulfill the law that you can't measure up to.
Yeah.
Right away he gives them the solution, but then he's probably he comes back to it and comes back.
So let's go to a simple one of those that again think how they did. So the next is value human life. You have heard that it was said to our ancestors, do not murder, and whoever murders will be subject to judgment. But am I reading the right ones? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell you, everyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. And whoever says to his brother, fool, will be subject to the Sanhedrin. But whoever says, you moron, will be subject to hellfire. So the first part was a pretty good statement, wasn't it? I mean, that's what you're talking about. So Jesus starts with something, and I bet everyone is Jesus, Jesus. I mean, yeah,
Amen. Amen.
Yeah, amen, brother. You've heard it said to our ancestors, do not murder, and whoever murders will be subject to judgment. That was a good statement, wasn't it? But
I tell you.
But I tell you, everyone who is either angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. And whoever says to his brother's fool will be subject to the Sanhedrin. But whoever says you moron will be subject to hellfire. So well, I hadn't killed anyone. I'm pretty good, aren't I?
Yeah.
And the law even had some exceptions so that if you killed someone under these circumstances, you're okay with those. And then Jesus just comes and absolutely drops the hammer that says, if you ever even thought of anything that might lead up to murder, you're just as guilty. Huh?
These poor guys are thinking exactly what I'm thinking. Like, what? I work with these people.
So what I wrote, and y'all say different, it still's tough. So we're not just responsible for our actions, but our emotions, which might lead to these actions. It's not enough to do right. We must truly think right.
Yeah. When they say Elvis is out of the building, to me, I'm going, I'm out. That keeps me out. I'm out of that one. I've just failed.
And we say guard your thoughts or whatever. And I'll just say here, when we say guard our thoughts, does it strike anyone to guard this strictly? Seriously. All right, so I'm going to say guard your thoughts. What are you going to guard against?
Murder.
Okay, murder. What else?
Stealing.
He didn't say anything about freeways though in here, right?
Freeways.
That's not in there, so I'm good.
You're good.
Right?
You are okay.
Yeah.
Exception.
It is so hard everywhere we go. I mean, I will say, I think everyone at work, we have people come in that are ugly and they're not nice and they're.
It just depends if you can't wake up on the wrong side of the bed. I mean,
Yeah.
is that your fault?
Yes.
And,
No, I know.
Guard yourself from hatred because of people like that.
Yeah. But it's so, boy, isn't it hard when someone comes in ugly.
Yeah.
Don't you deserve to be ugly back?
Or at Walmart when you know someone's getting ready to steal stuff. I just I have to really zip it.
See, I'm so different. Gosh, I'm so different.
So what are we
Yes.
supposed to teach people
I'm all wrong.
when we see that then that person's stealing? What are we supposed to teach
I
people?
said something. We were gonna have a fight right there in Walmart. It's terrible. I had to walk away.
So we probably should say something, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
then how
But when
should
you
we
do,
say
boy,
it?
look out.
Should be a little bit kinder instead of saying you idiot or you fool or moron or what are you doing?
Hey,
I mean, so
Well,
that's tough, because that's the first thought that comes to mind. It's like, what are you doing? And those names, and then like Gary said, the freeways especially, it's like,
I had a
one thing
lady,
come out of your mouth, and when somebody cuts you off, wow, that wasn't very.
but
nice,
it's
like,
amazing though, when you do try to correct somebody out of love, how people do respond. I mean,
I tried
for
that.
example, at McDonald's, when this lady who's in the drive-thru gets ticked because she didn't get a large French fry, comes in there and starts cussing the manager and making a fit, and my, 3-year-old daughter's sitting there watching, and I start counting to 10. And after I count to 10, and I'm done, and I just go off.
Well, sometimes being
And,
nice
and
doesn't
I
work.
say, that's enough, and we're done. The mouth is going to stop. You're going to quit over French fries. You need to leave. It's not that big of a deal. And I just walk the person out. And then everybody else is like, wow. I said, we have to make a stand on something like that. You don't have to shoot them, but still, you can't allow things like that to happen. I didn't have to cuss her or anything like that. I was just done. And we're,
You just have to do it right. That's
But
right.
you can't do that now.
No,
I did.
I try to be
I've
nice.
seen that things in my life at Dillon's.
Yeah. I do that.
I've tried niceness. I've tried everything. At today's age, you can get blown away for anything.
That's
Uh-huh.
true. That
You
is
can't
true.
do it.
Yeah,
But
you're right.
I think that's where the body of Christ really lacks, because we have standing up. We just think we're so fearful of guns and everything else. But really, a lot of it is that it's sometimes you have to make them wake up. It's like they're under a trance or something. You're like, oh, really? But it's the way you do it. It's love.
I
I
think
tried.
I
I
go
was
back
nice.
My
It
favorite
didn't work.
example still, I think, is Jesus at the well with the
The woman who's committed
woman
Right.
committing adultery and
Right.
has whatever.
6
and
husbands.
he basically tells her, okay, I know exactly where you're at. In fact, you're not married again, are you? You're
Right.
just living with him.
Right.
And she's waiting for the hammer to fall, right?
Yeah.
And what's his response?
Go get me a water.
Go and sin no more.
Right. Sure.
So again, he lets her know, yes, what you're doing is terrible in anyone's eyes, but he acts right. And I still say that's why the people hated him, because, and I still say that's why they hate Christians,
Well,
is when we correct correctly,
right.
it's infuriating. It is infuriating because I correct you, but don't get angry. Come on. If you're
That's true,
disgusted with my behavior, act like it, for goodness sakes.
I think that's really kind of the question that maybe that's the question that we need to ask in any situation when we're, especially if we're dealing with an issue where we could potentially lose our temper, we feel wronged or
Right.
whatever. Is really what is the desired outcome from my involvement at this point? Do I want to be judgment, or do I want an outcome where the resolution is such that this individual actually repents?
Right.
And I think and honestly, that's something that we need to probably plan ahead of time. A lot of times when we're in the moment, we're feeling the heat of the moment, and I've been there a lot of times where I'm just ready to kind of get it on. I think the truth is, and I'll be honest with you, I'm probably I tended to go there first. You know what I mean? I'm just like, if it's going to go there, let's go there now, kind of thing. But maybe the right approach, and I'm kind of learning as I get a little older that you do catch more flies with honey than vinegar.
Right.
And I'm trying to put that in practice even right now at work with individuals I'm having issues with. I'm just like, okay, what I don't need is more enemies. What I need is somebody on my side, and the way that that's going to work. And that goes for being a Christian, especially if you're looking at it from that perspective. Then it's like, okay, what would Christ in this situation? And obviously, the fruit of that conversation is going to be repentance. It's not going to be where this person feels condemned or feels guilty or anything like that.
My problem is I want it to happen now.
Right.
I don't want to plant a seed and then see it evolve 10 years later.
Right.
But I've learned to kind of do better with that. A lot of work I do.
Yeah.
Doesn't always work the first time.
No, and there's times where maybe an elbow to the face is a little easier. No doubt.
And I think that's exactly what you said. Is you got to plan ahead, and you've got to think what am I planning for, and I think you just said it is I'm planning to have it be an outcome that actually brings that person to Christ.
Absolutely.
And that should be our ultimate goal every time. But
When-
boy, isn't that tough.
When you're, one, in my witness, I guess, is when I am trying to tell somebody about Christ, I have a boldness, but my words, I have to try to explain it to them so elementary, and I struggle with that. And they were saying you need to write down your testimony so you're prepared for that, which is exactly you're prepared. But one of the things I know that I've learned to do is when I talk to someone who doesn't know the Lord is they look at the 10 Commandments as, okay, I didn't murder anybody, I haven't committed, I'm good. But when you tell them, when you ever had a bad thought, you're out, then they're like, what? The expression on their face is, wow, so I'm not good. So that when I tell them, if you lust after, if you look at that woman over there and you want to sleep with her, you've already broken that. You've already. That's
One approach in this I learned from my oldest daughter. I remember, and I might have brought this example before, but there was a time where we were sitting at a gas station and it looked like this one was kind of having a hard time. My oldest is like, Dad, go talk to her. Go talk to her. I'm like, shut up. It's like, stop. She's going to hear you, and you're making me feel bad. I don't want to do that. And so I tend to be very, I was getting convicted, but I was responding in the flesh. I was like, heck no, dude, you need to shut up, sit down, remember your place. I'm going to pump this gas and we're going to go. And I remember, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't approach this lady, but later on I was thinking, maybe a good approach would have been just simply to walk and be like, hey, is there anything I can pray with you about? You know what I mean? If you see someone maybe stealing in a Walmart or something like that, maybe this is just what it is. I mean, I probably won't ever do this, but if any of you are spiritual enough, to go up and maybe that be that approach, hey, is there, I just noticed you, I see what you're doing. I just want to ask you, is there something I can pray with you about? Do you really need that thing? Because I can get that for you, and plant that seed of graciousness, but I mean, I'll be honest with you. I say that because I was convicted over it, but I still haven't done it. I'll be honest.
I had someone at Christmas. We went by the store and it was an older fella and looked horrible, and he rode his bicycle up and he had his big bag and he went rummaging through the trash can. And so I'm going to go do a good deed, and I go off and park, and I can't stand it. And I go back and pull out some money and say, here, you look like you need this. He looked at me and says, give it to someone else. And I'm like, come on, you idiot, take this money. I'm trying to be good. Take it.
Yeah.
So
You fool.
Could have been an angel. You just never know who it was.
So anyway, I did go give it to the Salvation Army, which was not where I really wanted to give it. I didn't want to I wanted to give it to this one poor soul.
Right.
And anyway, so
Wow.
love
Wasn't
beyond
expecting that,
expectations, 43 through 45. This is the last one of these. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. So again, the first one, you've heard it that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. That's a good sound doctrine, isn't it? I love it.
What if your neighbor is your enemy?
Amen.
So, and then Jesus tears it
That's
up.
funny.
One interesting thing, though, just because we do all the time. So what is bad about that first part? That Old Testament command. Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.
Well, that's easy is to love your
Well,
neighbor usually.
What's
Yeah,
bad
that's
with it
easy.
is hate your enemy is
Right.
not
I
biblical.
don't remember that being.
They just added it in there.
Yeah.
So that was added in as scriptural law, but it wasn't what was even in the scripture. So you see how easy it is, because love your neighbor, the opposite, it must be hate your enemy. That's really good.
Yeah.
So anyway, but then he says, I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. So how should we pray? Let's get this straight. When we pray for those who persecute you, how should we pray?
Lord, give them what they deserve.
I'm content holding the door open in heaven. I'll tell you right now. I'm content. I'll be raking leaves or something. I'm okay with that. I know my limits. I know my limits.
There's scripture that says when someone is mean to you, you just speak so nice. It's like pouring coals or the hot coals on their head. I don't know why that happens to me. I think about that all the time.
And of interest there, just to say, so there's two things to that hot coals. One is what we think about it.
Right.
The other is the way they carried fire, which was so valuable, was with a pot that they carried on their head that you put hot coals in, and those hot coals were life-giving because that's how you carried your fire from place to place.
So yeah, I didn't even know that. That just ruined all of it.
Yeah, I know. So,
Darn.
but isn't that that's how God works? Dadgummit. Every time we think we deserve to judge, every time we think it's okay to be righteously, however, usually God's answer is no, because that's going to show someone else. I think is why. Is that why? So when it says love your enemies, how are we supposed to love them?
Well, by praying for them, and if they ask for a drink of water, you give them a drink of water, and that's.
All right, we're gonna have. I think we can do this. We're gonna have those. Who wants to strike this from our Bible?
Yeah, I've already one-lined it.
I think we can do
It's
that.
superseded.
Yeah. So that you may be sons of your Father in heaven, for he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and it sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. So what's that mean?
Promises of God. We're all the same under God. I don't care who you are.
God loves our enemies too.
God gives his
Which
best.
is,
I mean, that's it. He gives exactly the same.
And that's one of the things that the rest of the world hates about Christianity, because all of the rest of them say, our God is good, and we have the authority to punish you and annihilate you in the name of our God. We don't have that.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
Well, that's how tough it is. I mean, that's what Jesus did during this whole Sermon on the Mount. I just can't imagine. I say it. I do not like doing lessons like this because it's like I'm condemning everyone all the time. That's how I feel when I'm doing it. It's like, oh, good grief, give me a break. But that's what Jesus does, isn't it? He convicts you constantly. I mean, the more Jesus is in your heart, what happens through a day? You almost, you just about have to second guess everything you do. Why is that?
Life is so short. What's it going to profit you for being ugly?
I'll feel better.
Yeah.
I think for me, I just think is the process, the journey is transformed and being more like Christ, and and it's hard for me. I have red hair, and people automatically think they're going to get fiery, temper, and so I give them what they think they're going to get, So, but it's hard. It's a transforming for me.
Joyce, you said it's a lot easier now than it used to be. Is that right, Dad?
Are you just content? Is that what it is? Is that contentment?
I think so. A little serenity here and there. It comes. Don't sweat the big stuff. That's it.
We have to pick our battles. God's word.
Yeah, I mean,
The stronger you get in His word, it's easier.
I think it is, and we talk about being conformed to the likeness of Jesus Christ. What are we before that? We are pure sin nature, right?
Yeah.
So our nature is, but we're being conformed to the likeness of Jesus. What's that mean?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, especially when you look at, go the second mile, love your enemies and that kind of thing. It seems like, and this is, just take this for what it's worth, and this is my background, but I read this and I'm thinking victim, I'm thinking victim. I'm thinking you're basically going to allow someone who's not godly, who's not motivated by good things to basically use and abuse you, you know. And if you put it in the perspective of, you know, if we're vessels and we allow ourselves to be used by God and allow ourselves to be poured out for his sake, you're essentially opening yourself up to be that victim, you know. And that's an honest assessment throughout the history of Christianity as well. I mean, there's been multiple stories of Christians dying for their faith and being badly used and abused, you know, and enduring it for Christ. And really, I mean, if you take this really to the nth degree, you're basically saying, God, you know, I will allow myself to be a victim for you, you know, because you're going to put yourself in a spot like with that guy or with, I mean, who knows the situation, but it's just like Paul, you know, I mean, every person he saw, he approached and he tried to assess that need. I mean, I don't know, I'm not there, and I certainly don't think of myself as the victim type. And how I apply this, I have no idea.
I don't think any of us.
I don't think I'll be coming back to this class.
We keep working on it. So I think we are out of this. So anyway, comments, questions?
I think as you grow, or at least from my own standpoint, I didn't eliminate all the things. I just don't do them as often as I used to. And I don't carry them around as long as I used